Hey guys, how's it going? It's Pat the Grumpy Uncle again. Thanks for checking out some of these videos if you've been cruising them or if it's your first time. This is where I take the opportunity as a grumpy old man who's been there and done that in a lot of different situations to try to share a little bit of my life advice or my life experience with people that maybe or maybe not need some direction, need some mentorship or some sort of some questions answered and some I guess some direction when they're not getting it from anywhere, and the people that are trying to direct them, like social media or Hollywood or popular music or entertainment celebrities, aren't really doing the job. They're not really giving these young people or young people in general any valuable direction. So today, I did a little bit of notes, and I figured there's a couple things I wanted to talk about, and I figured that I wanted to touch on the idea of dads, dating, and deadbeats, and I think this is an important topic because I see a lot of young people making kids. You know, some of my daughter's friends were from years ago. Like one of them's on her third kid, with like two different baby daddies now, and it's insane. It's insane, and these young kids are going to grow up, and in 15 years are the ones that are going to be robbing our cars or breaking into houses or being strung out on the streets because they were unwanted, because nobody really stepped up to teach these young men how to be dads and to teach the young ladies how to respect their boundaries and how to respect themselves. I want to start off. I got some stats here that I'm just going to read off my notepad, and maybe I want you to think about this for a second, because these are very, very important stats. That children from homes without a dad make up for 63% of youth suicide. They make up for 90%, or they account for 90% of all homeless and runaway youths. 85% of all children that display behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. High school dropouts, 71% come from fatherless homes. Substance abuse, 75% of adolescent patients in the substance abuse center report coming from fatherless homes. 75% of sexual assaults motivated by displaced anger are caused by young men that come from fatherless homes that haven't had a male role model in their life to teach them good from bad, right from wrong, appropriate from inappropriate. And it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking, because I see a generation of young men being villainized for maybe the sins of their great-great-grandfathers, maybe their grandfathers, maybe even their fathers. But the sins of their fathers is just not being present. There's this term, it's juvenile delinquency. But the thing about delinquency that you need to know is that it means a failure of duty. And kids don't have duties. Kids are supposed to be kids. It's the parents that have the duty to raise good kids. And parents have been dropping the ball. So how do we fix this? Who's going to be teaching young men to be better men? We have a lot of people telling them all that they've done wrong and all they're doing wrong and what they need to do to fix themselves, but nobody telling them how. Nobody seems to be giving a damn about the young men. So here we go. Somebody has to have these conversations with some youth to talk to them about responsibility, about accountability. I know we're living in some rough times and people are doing whatever feels good, and a lot of times feeling good is getting laid feels good. It is the one of the major ways to escape the hopelessness of a situation. If you're not feeling that you have much of a future, or you're not feeling like you have a lot of resources, getting laid feels good. But there's serious consequences to that. And we've abandoned the responsibilities that come along with those consequences. We kind of think that, like, well, this is fun, it feels good, and if something goes wrong, I guess I'll deal with it then, without paying attention to the consequences of our actions. So I've got a quote here, and this is from I believe it's a website called Fatherless Sons. I'll try to put the resource in the caption here for you to check out. Young men who grow up in homes without fathers are twice as likely to end up in jail as those that come from traditional two-parent families. Those boys whose fathers were absent from the household had double the odds of being incarcerated, even when other factors such as race, income, parent education, and urban residence were a constant. So fathers and the lack of fathers have profound and important I guess, role in the lives of youth. So we're moving into this world now where we've replaced relationships, we've replaced compassion, we've replaced long-term dating, marriage, children, family. At least we're being encouraged to replace this with hookup culture, right? What used to be a father or an older male uncle sitting down with a young man and saying, hey man, this is how you do it. This is the proper way to respect a lady and to engage with your partner. Well, that's replaced by pornography or Hollywood or popular music and Spotify telling us or telling young people how they're supposed to engage with each other intimately. And it results in explosions in STIs and unwanted pregnancies. And unwanted pregnancies lead to the young men taking off because they don't want to deal with the consequences of the life they just created, or even young women that don't want to deal with the consequences, and so they neglect their children, or they dump them on their parents, or they dump them on strangers, and those children will grow up knowing they're unwanted, knowing they are not cared about, and go out into society resenting society. When I meet like really angry young men, I feel bad because I almost immediately, especially if they're hating authority and they're hating any role model or they're hating anybody that tries to help them, I feel bad because it's almost obvious, like, I'm sorry your dad didn't hug you, man. I'm sorry your dad wasn't around. What can I do to help? And the same goes for realistically, a lot of young ladies that are looking for inappropriate male attention early. They date the older men. They seek out certain energies because there was no man that said, I loved you, or God forbid, there was a man who showed an inappropriate way of love when they were young. So who is going to help these people learn what's right or wrong? That pornography isn't real lovemaking, that it's not even healthy sexual practices. A lot of the stuff you see in pornography, it ignores elements of consent. It ignores the element of negotiation, of romance. A lot of the practices that these shows and show you, that this content shows you, are literally physically dangerous for the people. Like there's bacteria that comes from the back door. If you get in the front door, that's a pretty big deal. They wipe away the idea of safer sex. And we call it safer sex because nothing's 100%. Even if you wrap it, stuff can sneak through, and that's going to affect you the rest of your life. There's lots of things out there that never go away. So a little bit of education and a little bit of responsibility when it comes to sexual health will go a long way. And I'm not talking about your identity. I'm talking about the actual act of meeting somebody, getting to know them, respecting them, securing consent, caring about this person, wanting to be with them before you decide that you just want to have fun with them. Once upon a time, it's one of my favorite sayings, once upon a time, you'd meet somebody, or your family would introduce you to somebody. And they say, hey, they're coming from a good family, they're a good person, maybe go out with them and get to know them a little bit. And you would court and you would get to know each other and you would have conversations. Maybe you would start dating. One thing leads to another. You get engaged, you get married, then you get to have sex. And once you have sex, oh my God, it's this crazy electric investigation of each other. And it's magical and it's special and it's sacred because this is a very special thing. And not only it's creating life, but it's also a heart connection with another individual. Then from that relationship in your newly married life, discovering sex for your first time, a baby is born and you now are a family. The divine union of masculine and feminine for the greater, whole, becoming a family. And you might still be doing it you might really love each other and you really get into it and you have a big family. And that's how tradition worked for thousands of years. Different variations depending on the culture, but that's largely how it is. So now we're living with tradition reversed, order in inverse. It's the opposite of what it used to be. Maybe I'm going to be not so bold as to say how it should be, but that order in inverse where you meet online, you meet for dinner, you negotiate maybe, or you figure sex is going to happen. And because you don't even know each other, who knows what kind of mistakes might happen. You could have consent mistakes. You could have health mistakes. You could have disease mistakes. This person could be doing it with 6 other people. Their body count could be ridiculous. You don't know what you're bringing to the table. And after hooking up, you find out whether you like them or not. You wake up in the morning and you have a conversation and you find out whether you have anything other than physical attraction in common, because the only thing you've based it on is superficial attraction, physical alone. So then after all of that, you might get to know each other. Maybe you decide you like each other after sex enough to date. So you date for a while and oops, this is a plus sign on my pregnancy test. Looks like we're having a baby. So maybe if you try to be responsible, you try to stick together for that kid's best interest. But then what happens if it doesn't work out? Maybe the young man never learned how to be a man and he pulls the deadbeat move and he takes off on the lady or the young woman, leaving her to raise a child alone. But nowadays, it's almost the opposite. It's almost like nurturing aspect of femininity has been robbed from young women. There's a lot of resentment for what men have been doing to them for quite a long time. So half the time, well, not half the time, but a significant amount of the time, I know many people, their wives have or their girlfriends or baby mamas ditches and leaves the baby with the boy. And so, you end up with an accidental pregnancy. You end up with an irresponsible attitude towards the child. Subconsciously or consciously, as that young person grows up, they're going to recognize that I wasn't wanted. You might have drugs entering into the picture because it was just something fun to do right off the bat. It wasn't special. It wasn't like heartfelt when you did this. It was just like having a beer, a toke, a line, another entertainment trip. And then you've created a life out of this. And where does that go? Where does that go? A broken home? I already gave you the statistics. Go back and listen to them. The results of a culture without fathers. So lots of times, and you can watch an entire generation was raised by single moms because there was a lot of dudes that didn't step up to their roles as fathers. And then they resent men 15, 20 years later, and they say men are the problem. Your dad didn't stick around, men are trash, and there's narrative about how horrible dudes are gets propagated because nobody ever taught the dudes that you're ignoring your responsibilities. You're ignoring your duty. You're ignoring what you're supposed to be doing. So there's this principle. It's in lots of different cultures. There is European history of this. There's Asian history of this. There's also, obviously, the indigenous medicine wheel. And it's a quadrant of, characteristics or principles that you can apply to pretty much any aspect of life, right? The human experience. And the 4 quadrants represent a physical and an emotional, a psychological, and a spiritual self. But we can apply that to sex. We can apply that to relationships. That if you meet somebody, you should have a physical connection, an emotional connection, an intellectual connection, and depending on your system of belief, like a spiritual connection. And sex has that component as well. There's obviously, you find somebody physically attractive. There's a physical act that's taking place. It's physical, right? But then there's also the element that there should be an intellectual understanding of we're both having our needs met. We're both interested in this on equal level, like not only consent, enthusiastic consent that I want to do it. I'm not just saying, fine, get it over with, or yeah, I'll let you do that because I think you love me. So you have that intellectual connection, but there should also be the emotional part where you care about the well-being of the person you're with. You care about what you're doing. And not just like thump, you have 2 eyes, I have 2 eyes, we have so much in common, it must be love. No, but like an honest emotional connection. And then the 4th part of the quadrant is the spiritual element. Recognizing that sex is a very sacred thing. It is part of the universal order of our biological imperative to spread our genes, to continue our bloodline, to put part of us into another part of somebody else and to create something greater out of that. That's a very sacred thing, regardless of your spiritual tradition or your heritage or your culture. Recognizing that all 4 of those areas in the medicine wheel are very important when you're, engaging with somebody. Now this stuff, this video is already twice as long as I like to make it. And that's just basically rudimentary covering some of my notes here. We could go off, and maybe in the future I'll do some videos on consent culture and how to negotiate, or even better, how to date without necessarily making mistakes. Because trust me, I've got a dumb body count. I've made lots of mistakes. I've been hurt. I've accidentally and on purpose hurt people through dating in the wrong way, dating inappropriately, cheating, all of that stuff. And all we can do is try to say, oh, wow, I've made mistakes. I recognize that mistake, and I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to try to make better choices. So if anything that I've talked about today resonates with you, if any of it makes sense, even if it doesn't, reach out. The email is in the bio up top. Ask questions for what it's worth. I want the best for everybody that's interested in doing self-work. If you're listening to this, it means it might have something resonating with you. Young men, grow up. Adopt your responsibility. Adopt your adulthood. Own the things that you're doing. Because if you create another life and that child grows up knowing my dad never gave a shit about me, that's a spiral to some of the most toxic behavior we can figure out. Be there. Be there. Be there for your partner. Be there for your kid. But in the beginning, be there for yourself. Because this stuff affects your reputation. It affects how you're viewed. It affects how they remember you. These are all tough lessons I've had to learn myself before I was able to actually articulate it enough to put it into content for you. Check out future videos. We'll cover some different stuff. So much to talk about. If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. As usual, peace, love, and granola. Stay safe.